Welcome to the Modern CPA Success Show, where we're 100% focused on helping accounting firms achieve success. If you're an accounting firm owner who wants to learn how to grow your firm by providing virtual CFO services, then this podcast is for you.
Hello, everybody. Super excited for today's guest. Today we are joined by Chris Williams, and we just normally we don't pre-show for our conversations, but the three of us just spent 20 minutes talking, which is awesome. I think we have a great guest here that's going to bring a lot of awesome topics because he seems to have knowledge in a lot of different areas, been involved with leadership and organizations for a very long time. So, Chris, welcome to the show, and why don't you give us a little bit of your background?
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me. Again, my name is Chris Williams. I've been managing and leading teams for over 40 years. I started my career in the tech industry, wrote some software. I've written software that probably almost every one of your users has run at one point or another in their life. But I found out throughout my career that my real passion was for building and leading teams. And I worked at Microsoft managing larger and larger teams, eventually ended up being vice president of human resources for the entire company, 32,000 employees in 160 locations worldwide. It was a big, big job. I enjoyed that a lot. Then after I left Microsoft, I've been consulting and coaching with startups and nonprofits and small businesses and helping people become better and smarter leaders. And the reason why your listeners might have seen me is for some strange reason, I've become remarkably popular on social media lately with over 175,000 followers on various platforms, and it's been a blast.
So I heard that you're pretty popular on TikTok. Does that mean you do like songs and dances and stuff? Is that what the gig is?
I have refrained from shaking my booty at any possible opportunities. That is not something that even my wife would enjoy, so I don't do much of that. What I have done, which has been, I think is a remarkable thing, is I've worked incredibly hard to make the production values of my videos be very careful and rich and thoughtful and well done. And it's been fun to watch TikTok, which again began as a dancing app or where people were showing pictures of their lunch and holding the shaky camera 2 inches from their face, respond well to quality videos that were well produced and thoughtful and had a point to make. And it's been fun to watch that happen. And when I got on TikTok, it was just starting to turn that way. And now TikTok is a really rich source of valuable business information that people who dismiss it as a kid's dancing app are doing themselves a disservice. Yes, but definitely. I also post a lot of it on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. But I've gotten them, strangely enough, and I didn't expect it myself, I've gotten the most traction on TikTok, which is frankly amazing.
I definitely want to introduce Josh too, real quick. So Josh isn't usually on this podcast, but since we're going to be talking people, and Josh is our people person, we also wanted to bring Josh Jeans on. So Josh, welcome to the show again.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I never thought about that. Josh Jeans, people person, got the double alliteration there. But I'm on our people team here. One thing I wanted to mention, Chris, I was engaging with some of you got a pretty big digital footprint. And it may be because the season is turning right now to fall, but as I was reflecting on a lot of your content, I was like, this is crisp and it's very refreshing. It's pretty different from what you engage with, especially in the TikTok space. And I was like, wow, I feel better after watching these TikToks versus I think a lot of times you scroll through TikTok for a long time and you're like, wow, I feel pretty terrible. I should go on a walk or drink some water or something. But, on our people team, I screen a lot of resumes. And something I really appreciated, for those of you who are listening, Chris has a really thoughtfully crafted YouTube channel and a video resume that's a little over 3 minutes long. And I was like, you packed a lot into that. So I know what you just shared with us as your background was a tiny snippet, because I know the 3-minute video I just watched also was, I'm sure, had to be trimmed down from everything that you've done in your past. So I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think you've added value to so many teams over, 40-ish years of professional experience. And you seem like a treasure trove of business insight. So I'm excited to move forward with our conversation here.
Well, thank you. I'm blushing horribly here. Thank you.
So let's start with a topic that we saw you recently talk about that I think is going to hopefully get us in a couple different directions. So we know the market has changed and COVID changed everything in a lot of different directions. But one of the terms that we heard you talking about is quiet quitting. So do you want to talk about that a little bit and what you're seeing and really just explain that term to our listeners?
Well, quiet quitting is, I actually think it had to have been made up by some manager somewhere who was frustrated with their employees not doing the work that they wanted to have them be done. And it's cute, as Josh noted, it's got alliteration, and so it's cute. But I think what I've seen is quiet quitting and the Great Resignation, and all of it is somewhat tied together into the same phenomenon, which is over the last 40 or 50 years, productivity has gone up, and but while real wage have not kept pace with that amount of productivity. And there's no question that technology has improved productivity, and that has made a significant difference. But nonetheless, even with that encountered, or even with that included, the wages just simply haven't kept up with it. In addition, managers and leaders have been asking their employees to do more, to work longer hours, to have more devotion to the company, with sort of the promise of getting a wage increase or a promotion or something in the future. And people were getting frustrated because those things were being held out as a carrot and it wasn't working. And so people were feeling, long before COVID, people were feeling frustrated, and particularly younger people who were feeling like the market was leaving them behind. And what happened was, along came this thing, COVID, that completely shook the entire job market. And it sent people home to sit on their couch and think about themselves and what they're doing. And do I really like this? And does it make any sense? And the people who could at that point did the Great Resignation, right? They decided, you know what? I'm going to go do something that really is something I'd rather be doing and maybe will pay me more. And now, as we're returning back to the office, and companies are saying to people, you got to come back to the office, and people are being forced back into a situation that they may or may not like, or they're returning back to the office and they're reminding themselves, my gosh, this job has always been a pain in the neck. They're finding that, putting in this extra work just wasn't getting me anywhere. So I'm just going to do what I'm being asked to do, and we'll see how it goes. Yes, it's very true that if you want to get promoted, you still have to put in the extra work. If you want to get a huge raise, you're still going to have to put in the extra work. But what I think is happening is the COVID pandemic shook the market and caused there to be some realization on the part of the employees that maybe they weren't getting everything out of this bargain they thought they should be getting. So I think this is in many ways just really, really healthy. I think it's the market sort of reacting to this huge change. I think the pandemic has done all of us a huge favor. It supercharged the move to remote work in a way that it was slowly happening, and companies were kind of wanted, some of it were trying, and all of a sudden everybody had to do it immediately at once. And that just completely shook the whole market. And it caused a bunch of companies to go, we can do this, and we never really thought we could. It caused other companies to go, oh gosh, I don't like this. But it has done a service to the entire job market in sort of shaking it up really hard so that it can sort of settle out the way it needs to settle out.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, and I know from our side we've seen a lot of that. And I think the interesting thing you mentioned was the compensation part of it, because I and Josh and I both experienced this during COVID. But some of the explanations we got for either people leaving or people not accepting jobs was just first time hearing it. Like, oh, I've decided I'm no longer going to be an accountant. I'm going to be a priest, or I'm going to do this. And it's like, so not only were people like saying, I need to find something that's going to compensate me more, or they were saying, well, if I'm going to make this amount anyways, maybe I can find something I really, really love doing. And so, I mean, Josh and I can tell you all sorts of stories. Like I said, how many times Josh and I met and be like, really? That's the reason they didn't accept this? Like, where we're going right now. So I think we definitely feel what you're explaining from our standpoint.
And what I saw was, in the years prior to COVID, it was a very rare individual who would come into your office as a leader and say, you know what, I've decided I'm going to, I had an employee who moved, left our company and moved across the country because there were more people of his religious faith in the city he was moving to, and it was important to him to do that. That took incredible strength and courage to be able to make that change at that time. COVID all of a sudden shook everything up so randomly that all kinds of people could have that kind of self-realization and thought about who they are and what they're doing and what they're strong at in a way that just wasn't possible before. And I think the next 4 or 5 years are going to be incredibly exciting to watch companies figure out the mix of hybrid work and remote and in-person, the mix of people who want to push really hard and the people who are just going to do what they need to do because they want to have some better work-life balance. I think there's going to be a really interesting few years here where the working world rebalances itself as we sort of settle out of this huge shock that the whole work world got put through.
Yeah, I love that example you gave, Chris, and it brings to mind for me, I think a lot of people in this reshuffling have realized maybe I was compromising a little more than I had to, and I don't have to compromise quite as much. We've got people who are on our team because during the pandemic, they realized, oh, my job has gone remote. I really do want to live close to my family so my kids can grow up with grandparents, or I want to live in a city that's closer to, activities that I like living in the mountains or at the beach, or, where people are more politically aligned with me or ideologically aligned. And they got to make those moves. And then when their jobs started going back in person, they're like, oh, I need to find something that's indefinitely remote so I can stay in this place I enjoy more.
There's another side of this too, which is that it used to be that jobs were fairly sticky, right? You would only get a promotion if you had seniority and some time in the job. It was difficult to change jobs because you had to worry about transporting your health insurance. It was frequently the best way to get a raise was through longevity. And now what we're seeing, the younger people have it also, people look down on resumes that had 6 or 7 jobs in it. None of that is the case anymore, right? But health insurance is far more portable. Often the better way to get a raise is to go to someplace else and get a raise. And nobody looks sideways at somebody who was in a job for a year or two and then decided to go to someplace else. And so a lot of that has changed and provided the flexibility that wasn't in the job market before.
Are you interested in offering virtual CFO services at your firm or scaling your existing service offerings? The Virtual CFO Playbook, How to Land $60,000 a Year Clients and Provide a Killer Client Experience, is an online series of modules that will equip you with essential tools for creating and delivering scalable VCFO services. These approaches have helped Summit CPA grow from $500,000 to upwards of $5 million in revenue over the past decade. If you're ready to grow your firm, visit summitcpa.net/VCFO Playbook to enroll now.
I'm curious, Chris, to know, in your experience as a leader and kind of speaking to leaders of people you've got some portion of your organization who really is that driven type person who really wants to get to the next level, wants to go above and beyond, do that extra step, stay late, whatever that means, kind of have the broadened strategic vision. And you've also got people on your team who maybe their great passion lies with a nonprofit that they're on the board for, or with their kids or their family. And that's where they want most of their emotional and mental energy to go, but they still want to do the job that they're assigned to do. How do you move forward supporting those two seemingly really different sets of motives on the same team?
I think you're actually understating the level of the problem. In fact, I think one of the things that separates a good leader from a great leader is a leader who is tuned into the needs and requirements of each and every single person on their team. So I talk to leaders all the time about not only the kinds of things you were talking about, which is recognizing what energizes people and what gets people to want to be there and participate. Like, I don't think the person who is completely dedicated to their job and then leaves and goes to work at a nonprofit is not a great employee, right? They can be perfectly wonderful employees during the time that you've got them. So what you need to do as a leader is make sure you recognize and understand that. And when they say, I've got to leave early because I need to go do something, you say, sure, sounds great. And you support them in doing that. But it goes even further than that. I think great leaders go all the way down to the level of communication that employees need. One of the things that many managers struggle with, for example, is having a difficult conversation with an employee. And different employees respond to feedback in different ways. And the smart manager tunes their message to those people in that way. So there are some people, for example, who are old, crusty veterans and they've been around a long time. And if you come to them with the sort of the sandwich approach, the soft, okay, oh boy, you're really doing well, but we've got this one issue we'd like you to work on, they will eat you alive. What they want to hear is, tell me what the problem is. Just be straight with me. Tell me what it is straight up. Then other employees, usually it's very often new employees who are tenuous and they're not sure exactly if they're doing the right thing or not. And if you come at them with some really hardcore feedback, they will freak out and often go cry in their office. So you need, as a leader, to be able to tune your message to the person that you're talking to. So not only should your message be different, but the kinds of things that you need to recognize in each employee. What is the thing that keeps them, alive? What is the thing that they really want to pay attention to? What is the thing that motivates them to be here? And you're right. Some people will, I want to be a manager. I want your job someday, right? That classic old line, right? There are some of those people, and you should figure out a way to support those people and figure out a way to give them your job at some point. And there are other people who, as you notice, are going to, for want of a better term, quiet quit, right? They're going to do something else that is more important. And you need to figure out how to support them too. So a smart leader is flexible in the way they communicate, in the way they support, in the way they correct, in the way they encourage, completely different for every single employee. And I'll be the first one to tell you, that's one of the reasons why I tell leaders that you really don't want to have a direct report team much bigger than about 6 or 8, because it gets really complicated really fast.
I'm glad you said that. I was going to ask, what does that look like? I love, one of my strengths is individualization. So I love getting to know somebody for who they are, what motivates them. But you're exactly right. I think setting a cap on it, because you can't do that for 30 people. Well, there's just no way, or you won't be able to do anything else in your job if you're doing that.
Well, in point of fact, you will do it badly, right? And if you have to distribute your attention across 30 people, you will just not do it well, right? And you might as well not have done it at all. So I'm a firm believer that every leader should have a team of people around them. And that number, I've seen people do 10 or 12. They are Herculean tasks. It's a team that's 5, 6, 8, whatever, that you can gather around a table or around a Zoom that is comfortable and you can all talk together. That's a great number. And that also allows the leader to be able to know each person and tune their message to each one of those people in a meaningful way. What that also requires you to do, though, is to have faith in them to be able to do the exact same thing down to their team. And down to their team. And so if you're a CEO, you need to surround yourself with a C-suite that is talented and smart and that you know well and understand and work with individually, and that each one of them has a team that they are talented, feel is talented and smart, and they know how to work with. And each one of those, what you're trying to do is build an organization that has those characteristics.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I was going with it too, is as you were first describing it, I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then Josh's question came to my mind as well. And now the follow-up question is this is something that we're actually doing. So I was exactly guilty of what you said, where prior to a couple months ago, like I was overseeing a team of way too many people, and it was me, and I felt like I was not doing good at it because I didn't have the time to get the personal touches that I used to. And so one of our scaling up models is to, okay, we need to add more of those management people that can do what I was doing at a direct level. So I think the big part of this is training future leaders. So do you want to talk a little bit about how you go about training future leaders so that you know that, okay, well, I'm not the one talking to all of our CFOs. We have a CFO leader that's talking to them, and I know they're doing just as good of a job, or they're doing it the way that they're getting that personal touch.
Well, there's two levels of training that matter, right? There's the mechanics of doing whatever it is that you're doing. I'm a CFO, and I understand how to read P&L statements, and I can understand the difference between this, that, and the other, right? There's the technical management of the job at hand, but then there's also all those soft skills. And I have looked at 150,000 ways for people to, go to a workshop and learn soft skills, or go to, read 17 different books, and to be really honest, none of them seem to have much of a half-life. People get, they leave the meeting and they're all charged up and they know what they're going to do. And by Thursday, reality has hit them in the face and they've got to fire somebody, and all the things they learned about it, they're gone. So one of the things I'm a huge fan of is making sure that you have if you're a manager of managers, that you have a close enough relationship with that person that they can come to you and say, okay, I need to fire Charlie on Thursday, and I'm not really sure the right way to do that. Can you give me some suggestions on how I might be able to handle this? What does that conversation look like? And that you can have that conversation. That's another reason for not having too large of an organization. But you also need to have a relationship with your employees that they're not afraid to come to you with those kinds of questions. Look, I don't really know how to fire people. I've never had to do it. I know that you've fired people before. Can you help me? And one of the things I do in my consulting business is I help managers who are stuck in a situation like that, where they're worried they can't go to their manager and talk to them about those kinds of things. And so I try and provide that third-party perspective. Hey, I've seen people fire people this way, that way, and the other way, and the first two ones blow up in their face, and the last one, and this is how it tends to work. But the long answer, or the short answer to that long answer, is that what I've found happens is experience is what teaches you many of these things. You have to have stepped on the bee to know that they hurt when you step on them, right? And you also need to have resources available to be able to go talk to someone else about it. I'm not a huge fan of the one mentor model where you tie yourself to a single human being, but I am a huge fan of people being willing and open and understanding of needing mentors, needing people you can sit down with and talk to and ask questions about. And that's where you can avail yourself of your manager if they're great, a peer who may have been through similar experiences, or a third party like myself or yourselves, being able to avail someone of the kinds of experiences that they need.
Yeah. So my follow-up question to this is how much of that is access versus personality? And what I mean by that is, okay, is the reason they're not going to me and asking, hey, I have to fire someone tomorrow, can you help me with this, because they can't find me, or is it because they don't think that I'm approachable, or is it one and the same? Like if you give them access, you show more approachable. So I'm curious, in your consulting, which of those do you find to be the problem?
I think it is a trust problem more than anything else, right? In most situations, most managers, if one of their employees comes to them and says, look, I really need a half an hour of your time, they will figure out a way to get a half an hour of your time. So, particularly if the person makes it clear that this is something important that they want to talk about. If you're constantly wasting my time, I'm going to be a little hard to get access to. But most managers will listen. If an employee comes to them and says, I really need a half an hour to talk about something, can we do that? That access isn't the issue. The issue is that they worry, the employee or the manager who is talking to their supervisor worries that if I go in there, you will think I'm an idiot. You will think I don't know what I'm doing. And what the manager, the supervisor, or the C-suite person, the person on top needs to do is to say, hey, no, look, I struggled with that too. I was no good at doing, firing people when I first did it. And so here's what I learned. And there needs to be a trust level there. I think it happens particularly the higher up you go in an organization, the more people think that their persona, their representation of who they are afraid to show that to their boss because they're afraid their boss will think they're not capable or not worthy of it. And to have that level of trust between you and your boss is essential. And almost all of the creation of that trust is on the person on top. They have to be vulnerable. They have to be accepting. They have to be willing to say, hey, tell me what your issue is. Oh, well, I don't know how to fire people. Oh, God, I never knew how to fire people too. Let's talk about how, I've done it in the past and how that might work. That level of trust is something that you need to establish. And again, this all goes back to I know you as an individual. You and I have had individual conversations in the past where we know each other and we can have that kind of a conversation.
I'm curious, Chris, to know, how, and this may be a two-part question, what do you think is the normal timeline for a healthy relationship to get formed between a manager and a direct report where that trust is built? Because obviously it's not going to start on day one, like, oh, you work under me now, you're reporting to me in this new position, you trust me. And second to that, how long is it normally? And if you're in a position right now where you're leading people and realizing this is not happening for me, I don't have these kind of bridges of trust built in my relationship, what's the first step that I take to start making that happen to get us on the right trajectory?
I think if you go to work for somebody and within 3, 4, 5 weeks, you are not feeling any kind of a connection with that person, there should be hairs on the back of your neck standing up, and you should be a little bit worried about whether or not you've established any kind of a relationship with that person. I would say right away is too slow. Because that's the ideal scenario, but people are busy and you're never going to get the kind of time that you need to be able to do it. But I think 3 or 4 hours of conversation with someone should be enough time. So if you have a weekly or a bi-weekly one-on-one with that person and you've had several conversations, you should be able to have that kind of a conversation. The problem that is the sticker in both of those is that the two of you will end up, particularly on both sides, you end up in a dance of vulnerability. The person underneath is worried about feeling naive, and they want to know, they want this person to trust them that they've got their job completely under control. I got this. Don't worry about it. I got it under control. So showing some level of vulnerability is scary. The person on top doesn't want the person underneath to think that this person, ever didn't know how to do their job, right? So both sides have to do it. It's a very delicate dance of, hey, no, it's cool. Come to me. We'll talk about this. We'll make it work. And both sides have to do that. If you are stuck in a scenario where you've got somebody who refuses to let you in at all, I have found that you can shake that tree loose with an honest question about, hey, I'm trying to get your opinion on this thing. How come I can't get you to give me a real honest answer on that? Or push back. Hey, are you sure that's the way you really would do that? What about I think if you, and in many cases, that will shake the person on top's wall of fear enough to have you both have a meaningful conversation. Now, I will be honest with you, some percentage, 5, 10, 20% of senior leaders just have that defensive wall up and it will never come down. And you just end up that's when people need to turn to somebody else, either a peer or an outside person or whatever. and you can't get past that wall of invulnerability, or whatever you want to call it. Does that make any sense? Am I?
No, that definitely does. I think I like that you say, it's appropriate to kind of put somebody back on their heels, not in an aggressive way, but just to say, "Hey, I can tell that this is kind of like a rehearsed answer, and I'm really trying to actually learn from you." Or I want to know, I know you're a person, so I know you've screwed this up before. Like, give me the real advice. Like, tell me about when, this fell apart before, because I don't need the rehearsed polished answer. I'm not trying to take your job today. I'm trying to learn from you.
Right. And I think one of the things that happens is it's often a game of chicken. It's often a game of who's going to be vulnerable first.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's why I like to teach managers to be vulnerable first to the employee, because that opens the door to you will oftentimes, if you can do that immediately, you will get this huge flood of relief on the side of the employee. Oh gosh, I'm so glad I can have this conversation with you and we can talk openly and honestly about that. But sometimes as an employee, you have to be the one to sort of poke the balloon and say, hey, that sounds like, I've read that in a book too, but that doesn't feel like the way we really do that around here. Or that doesn't feel like the way I've seen you do it in the past, or anything like that just sort of questions a little bit. And sometimes you can shake them and break that balloon.
I like that. That just seems like a really authentic way of managing up, of saying, I'm trying to set a new norm in our relationship, and it feels risky to me to do it, but feels a lot better than, like you said, the 17 business leadership books I read. Like, sure, I have the theory, but I have to be able to, for lack of a better word, bleed in front of you a little bit in order for us to start building trust.
Again, there are 1,000, gimmicks for building trust. Right? Falling back into each other's arms, or, all of it. There's 1,000 gimmicks for building trust, but I said this in one of my videos, the only authentic way to build trust is having gone through stuff together and come out the other side, right? So, that's just the only way it happens. You can try and manufacture it. You can try and follow some book and get there. But the only thing that really works is you and I have gone through something that was, hard and difficult together, and we did it side by side, and we came out the other side, and you had my back and I held up my end of the bargain, and we now both trust each other that this is going to work. That's the only way authentic trust gets built. And both of you have to be willing to give a little in that scenario in order for the trust to be established.
Yeah,
I think
that helps me not begrudge adversity too, to know like, oh, this actually, we could have a healthier team on the backside of this than if we just had smooth sailing the whole time.
In fact, going through stuff is incredibly healthy, and it takes the leader most often in those cases to say to people, hey, it's okay, we're going through some stuff, this is hard, don't let anybody tell you this is not hard, this is hard, we're going through this, come on, we can do this, and once we get out the other side, we're going to be okay. And then it's important for the leader, once you get out the other side, to acknowledge, hey, we made it out the other side, this is cool, we have done this. All of a sudden you have this just flood of trust on everybody's side, and things will just sing from there on out.
That's definitely a key takeaway for me. So I'm thinking back to CFOs I've trained or seniors I've trained or that I've worked with. And I think that there are certain situations in our job that when you go through one of those things together, when I help a CFO onboard a client and I'm sitting there every step along the way, and this client is a little bit tricky and we get through it. And now this client we have a great relationship with. Not only do we have a great relationship with that client, I now have a great relationship with that CFO because that CFO has seen us work together and we've worked together on getting a client through a tough spot. So I think it's a well point taken. And that's definitely my takeaway from this podcast. But I'd love to hear, as we're getting close to the end of the time here, I'd love to start with you, Chris. And one final thought for our listeners when it comes to everything we've talked about here. We've covered a lot. We probably could cover a lot more in a whole nother podcast, but I'd love for you to give just one final thought for our listeners when it comes to people.
Well, I think one of the things that every leader needs to understand is everything we've just discussed. These are all not. I recoil when I see people in tech or people in your line in the accounting world or in who when they interview people focus on those hard skills and their ability to reverse a doubly linked list or be able to balance a complicated books or whatever it is. I worry when people focus on those sides of the skills. Yes, of course, at the line level, you need to make sure that people can actually do the job they want. But once you get above that first level management position, it's a completely different job. And it's way important that the kinds of things that you're talking to people about are the kinds of soft skills and recognition of other people and those kinds of things. The thing I look for, the thing I want to, when I'm interviewing people and looking for people on my team is I want to know, are they smart people who are learners and can adapt to a wide range of situations? If you can somehow suss that out in the conversations that you're having with them, there's somebody who is passionate about learning things. They know and understand what they're trying to do, and they have the communication skills that you're looking for. If that's what you've got, you can teach them how to balance a spreadsheet, or you can teach, those things are teachable. The kinds of things that are hard to find and incredibly valuable are this adaptation, this vulnerability, this ability to learn, all those soft skills are the things I think people should be looking for. And I think many, many companies over-index on a whole lot of the technical part of their job that just really isn't what the job is all about, right?
No, that's a great point. I know Josh and I are involved in a lot of interviews, and we've talked about that. What are we looking for? And that is definitely something that I know, especially in a CFO type role. I mean, a CFO, people come with a lot of different experiences, but what you're looking for is, are they a constant learner? Can they adapt? Can they really apply what they've done in the past to this future job? So that is great feedback for our listeners.
And none of that is it has gotten just stunningly more important in the last 5 or 10 years, right?
Great.
As the pace of things change just incredibly quickly. Again, just as we were talking about in the very beginning, to circle it all the way back around, the leaders who can figure out how to manage remotely are people who have figured out how to learn to do that. Nobody knew how to do, or very few people knew how to do it well, but they learned and adapted and figured out how my management style works in remote and how it doesn't. And you want people who are that kind of flexible and can manage in a dynamic situation.
I definitely agree. All right, Josh, I'm going to throw it over to you. What is your takeaway from this interview, and then also any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I think something that really stood out to me about what you just shared, Chris, or the image that comes to my mind is thinking of, people that we hire in the short term. When I'm thinking of the next 1 to 2 years, sure, they're going to be an individual contributor, and some people will want to stay there. But I think really my takeaway is wanting to emphasize, well, where is this person going to be in 5 or 10 years? Because the chances are they're going to be a people leader, and that's going to be the biggest lift of what they're doing in their day-to-day life and job. If they want to keep moving up, growing in influence, kind of growing in the footprint of their role. And you're exactly right. As they move more and more into people leadership, some of those technical skills are important to have, but their rank of importance in that person's job and their day-to-day life fall significantly. So it makes me want to think, how do I, on the front end, when it comes to recruiting and onboarding and training staff, kind of lift my eyes to have more of a 10-year perspective on who are the types of team members that we have that we can develop into really effective people leaders, in addition to people who can do their job really well. But I think that you kind of helped me tilt my vision up a little bit more from the 1 to 2 year to that 5 to 10 year strategic length.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that much beyond that first level of manager or two, where the people will want to make sure that you are worthy of the respect because you know how to do the actual mechanics of the job really well. Above that, once you get above that first or maybe second level management job, what people are recognizing you for are your communication skills, your ability to work with people, your ability to lead and set a vision and chart a course and encourage people and correct things. And those skills, I don't know about you, but I don't know a CEO. I mean, yes, you can ask them about balancing a spreadsheet, but the vast majority of their job has nothing to do with the actual plumbing of what their business does day to day. It's setting a vision, charting a course, moving the company ahead as a group. So, and that's just something that happens all the way up the chain. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you move up the chain of any organization. And I think recognizing that in people early is a core company value. It's something that companies can really excel at.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you were a great guest, Chris, and I can tell that because I'm going to go back and listen to this because this entire time I wanted to be taking notes, but I also wanted to be engaged. So I'm going to have to go back and listen and get this all on paper. But if our listeners want to find you, what's the best place to find you?
I'm at clwill.com. That's CLWILL.com. And you can go there and see all about me and find links to things like my social media pages with all the billions of people who are following me, and also talk to me about working with me if you want to.
Great. Well, I appreciate both of you guys' time. And like I said, I think this is a great episode. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Great to have you,
much.
Chris.
Enjoy this podcast? Visit our website at summitcpa.net to get more tips and strategies for achieving modern CPA firm success. We're here to be a resource in this ever-changing industry.